Ooh, you didn't tell me you were a brainiac.
All right, well, here we go. It is officially playoff time, and golly gee, I'm excited to chat about it. Slapdawg here, and I have my boy Scotty Del Rey to chat about the playoffs, to chat about some of the news that has happened. The Bengals, they're eliminated from the playoffs by the Chiefs. You have Tyreek, who wants out of Miami. We have our official results for Kickoff Karaoke, and I'm excited to chat about that. It came down to the wire.
Don't give it up.
No.
They got to listen. They got to put in the time if they want to find out who won.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
I mean, if they listened last week, they can probably guess.
They could go back to last week's episode and maybe even just tune into the last 10 minutes and they could figure it out. But we're not going to tell you. We're going to wait, and the listeners are going to have to wait until we talk about it. But before we talk about any of that or anything else that has happened in the NFL world, we have to give a shout out to our sponsor, Erica's Healthy Pet. Ladies and gentlemen, whether it be cheesy bites, turkey jerky, beef liver chews, sweet potato chips, and so much more, go check out ericashealthypet.com for all of your pet's essential needs. All of the things that I just mentioned and so much more is over there at ericashealthypet.com. And if you use code LB20, you're going to get 20% off your first order. It's a no-brainer, really. Throughout the season here on the show, we have watched our co-hosts eat some of these treats for themselves because they're so delicious that why not? And are depriving their loved dogs of eating them. But whether it be you or your dog or maybe a loved one, go buy them a gift from Erica's Healthy Pet. And use code LB20, you're going to get 20% off. Once again, ericashealthypet.com. There's absolutely no other place that you should go to get a treat or topical solutions. Whatever you need for your dog, your cat, your loved animal, go check out ericashealthypet.com. All right, let's talk about Tyreek Hill. He's out, Scotty. I don't know if you knew this. Tyreek Hill he's wanting out of Miami. And there was an interview after the Dolphins had lost their game, or after the game was over. He was in the locker room and he was chatting with reporters, and it was about a 2-minute long interview. And essentially, he had kind of gone on and said, like, you know, these reporters were asking him how his how he thought the season went and how it was, was he disappointed? And it started off as like a pretty cordial interview where it was like he was trying to be professional. He was trying to be not as frustrated as I'm sure he is. And then by the end of the interview, he goes, "Yeah, I want out." Like he's like, I want out of Miami. So, do you think he regrets leaving the Chiefs for money?
Well, I mean, in hindsight, it's pretty easy to say yes. I mean, it's difficult to say that from our perspective because it's like, yeah, I would want to win Super Bowls, but if I had to choose between Super Bowls and the contract he got to go to Miami, it's like, well, pretty hard choice. I'd be pretty happy with either of those. So I don't know. I part of me thinks that Tyreek is like, yes, he's nearing, getting toward the end of his career. He wants to be able to compete for Super Bowls. It's not obvious that Miami is a place that he's going to be able to do that, but we also have to factor in he just got done with a very frustrating game after a very frustrating season. Who knows if this is just kind of his emotions getting the better of him, and in a couple days he comes out and says, hey, I acted a little rash here. We're going to go into the offseason with open minds and just kind of see how things play out. I could kind of see it going either way.
You realistically think Tyreek Hill would come out and say that? Because in my mind, there's absolutely no way he would ever do that.
He wouldn't say that as articulately as me. He might say some other things. But I think maybe to the effect of after having a conversation with his agent, after having a conversation with the head coach, maybe a few more zeros or some sort of incentive to get him to come back. I still think it's a possibility. With him saying this is about as definitive of a quote as you can get from a player, though. So obviously it's leaning more toward he's done in Miami.
Well, let's not forget the financial obligations that come alongside with this, because the question at hand now is what team is going to want to carry the burden of his contract. And look, I mean,
a lot of teams would.
I think some would, but I think that it's not nearly as easy as like him just being a free agent and being like, yo, I want out of this place. Like, I'm not coming back. I think it certainly muddies the waters in that respect, where these, whatever team would want him is going to have to pay quite a hefty price contractually to be able to get him. I don't think he's a Dolphin next year because You've seen some of these like high-profile wide receivers, and Stephon Diggs certainly comes to mind. Is somebody who becomes somewhat of a locker room cancer, and while we're not in the locker room and we don't know exactly how things are going down, I think it's safe to assume that Stephon Diggs, they got rid of him because he was a problem, because he was causing issues within that organization in that locker room, and so like, you know what, we can do this without you, and I mean largely they are, but. I think Tyreek Hill's kind of the same vein in that respect, where I think Miami, if he continues to be a problem, they're just going to be like, yo, let's just get this guy out of here and let's move forward, and let's because the culture, I think that's something that's not talked about enough in football as far as like the culture of the locker room. We look at all of these NFL players and their athletic prowess and their ability to do things on the field, but which is amazing. But there are so many other things that really go into everything that enables them to get that far that isn't highlighted nearly as much. And I think the culture of the building and the culture of the, you know, the coaches and the players and all that kind of goes into it. And when you have a cancer that is the culture, and you have somebody who's actively going against and creating disarray, I think there is grounds for them to just say, you know what, like, let's just get him out of here.
Yeah, it's interesting to think of the situation from the Dolphins' perspective too, because, you know, you're talking about culture and we don't really know to what extent Tyreek Hill may or may not be causing issues in the locker room. Obviously he's frustrated, and I'm sure that carries over to some degree, but you also have to look at, okay, they just signed Tua, they have Waddle on a relatively cheap contract for a little bit. They don't really want to have to make all these massive changes right now when they feel like maybe there are just some pieces here and there that can get them back to, you know, putting up 90 points on the Broncos or whatever they put up a couple years ago. So, you know, it's kind of interesting with teams like Miami and teams like the Jets come to mind too, where it's like on paper, it seems like these guys should be able to compete. And I don't know exactly what small pieces need to be changed to get them back into a winning mindset, but it's almost like the last thing they want to do is say, okay, we're going to upend everything right now when we just re-signed our quarterback, and in a couple of years we're going to have to pay our star receiver. You know, I think they're going to do everything they can to keep him there, whether or not that's possible.
I think they paid Waddle this offseason, actually. I believe.
Oh, did they?
I think it was a 3-year deal. I'd have to go back and look at it. But
No.
the other piece of this is Mike McDaniels. I mean, the Dolphins came out and said, hey, we're going to retain Mike McDaniels. I was never really of the belief that he was on the hot seat, so I found that kind of interesting that they kind of announced, and maybe there was chatter that I was unaware of, but they came out and had a press statement saying like, hey, we're going to retain this guy. And so I'm curious as to your thoughts on that. Do you think Mike McDaniel should have been on the hot seat here to begin with, or do you agree with the call for them to keep him?
I don't know. You know me. I'm an old man at heart, and when I see someone like Mike McDaniel, I don't see someone who's going to have a ton of success as a football coach. He just doesn't fit the profile for me, and he never has, especially after Hard Knocks when we got cameras behind the scenes and we saw the way he interacted with players, and it's just like, I don't know, this whole thing just kind of seems like a smokescreen a little bit. You know, there's no doubt he knows football. There's no doubt he can put together a competent offense, but whether or not he is capable of being a leader of men to a degree necessary to, you know, find real success sustained in the NFL, I think is still kind of up in the air. But with that said, given how recently this team looked like a powerhouse, it does seem like it would be a bit premature to get rid of Mike McDaniel right now. It seems like they have to ride him out a little bit longer.
So do you think going into next season, if we don't see them blow out the Broncos by 70 points, I'm extrapolating a bit here, but do you think that, you know, if we go with a 500 team with the Dolphins next year, Mike McDaniels is out?
Yeah, I think if we have a similar result to this season next year, you know, the other thing that really kind of throws a wrench into the conversation is the Tua injury. I mean, we saw this team without Tua for so long that, you know, who knows how things would have been. And, you know, they did certainly when Tua came back, they looked a lot more competent at the end of the season than they did even with Tua at the beginning of the season. So it seems like they were finding ways, I guess, to be a little bit more competitive. But yeah, I mean, I think if this team is anything less than, you know, a solid playoff team next year, we're going to be having this conversation in a very serious way.
Well, and I'm really glad you brought up the Tua thing, because that's where I was going to go next. And during during Tyreek's interview here with these reporters, he even mentioned, he kind of alluded to that. And he goes, it's really hard when you don't have your QB1, right? And he said, and that's no disrespect to Snoop, but he had to come in and learn the whole playbook, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And also to say, I think that holds a lot of ground. And that is my next question is like, okay, Chris Greer. He's the GM for the Dolphins. Should he not be on the hot seat and be like, I think if anything, he should be on the hot seat infinitely more than Mike McDaniels because, and we had this conversation week 4 when Tua went out, whatever week that was. And I had stated like, what a disservice you did to this team, knowing that Tua's brain scrambles that's a looming issue. That's not going away. That's not something that's just, all right, he's good to go. Like one more concussion we said this last time and then Tua came back and it's like, we're really pushing the boundaries here for like this team losing their quarterback, right?
Yeah.
And you did nothing. You did nothing in the offseason knowing that this was a problem. You didn't get a competent backup quarterback. Like, go get Jameis Winston. Go get somebody who at least can maybe win you some games in the event that Tua goes out because Snoop Huntley wasn't the answer. And you did nothing in the offseason to strengthen your quarterback room knowing that you had this problem. And I look at that and I say that's a big error by the GM. That is a failure on your part.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I still think there are a lot of Dolphins fans who are not super happy with giving Tua an extension just because of this. I mean, Tua, he seems like a very nice guy, seems like the kind of guy you'd want to lead your franchise, like personality-wise, and obviously we've seen him have some success on the field, but man, like this is just a liability, and Dolphins fans know that better than anybody, that this is something that if one thing goes wrong, all of a sudden your organization is in complete disarray. So at the very least, you have to invest in, a Joe Flacco level backup that can come in and be a game manager with all the pieces that you have on offense. Or at the very least, I think you need to start thinking about your stars. You need to start thinking about people like Tyreek Hill. Okay, what backup quarterback can we get in that can air the ball out and actually make completions, even if someone like Jameis Winston is a great example. Maybe they're going to make stupid mistakes, but at least it's going to be exciting. You're going to get your playmakers involved in the offense and hopefully keep them happy and prevent this exact situation from taking place. So I agree with you that the GM, I think, deserves a lot of the blame just for this overall situation. Now, next year, maybe Tua is fine all year. Maybe this offense is great, and maybe we're idiots. But for right now,
I just don't think that's a gamble you should take regardless.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing, too, is because they already signed Tua, now getting rid of the GM sort of feels like an admission that that was a mistake. And I don't think they can do that. So I don't know that they would be willing to say that the GM is on the hot seat. But again, if we get to the same situation next year where this team is missing the playoffs, I think everything's up for grabs. I think head coach, I think GM, I think it's time to reevaluate the entire situation.
I think Alan would articulate this perfectly. It depends on what it looks like, right? Like if going into next year, week 5, Tua gets a concussion, then I think that is going to largely, what did you do this offseason? Did you get a quarterback? Did you get somebody that is able to run this team without Tua in the event that he's no longer able to play football? What did you do? Did you get a backup quarterback that's competent? Are you planning for this? Because you should have planned for this going into this season, and that very clearly was not the plan. So it's going to be interesting, but also say, I think...
Hey,
I don't know.
You're welcome, you're welcome back in Kansas City, Tyreek. That's all I got to say.
I was just going to say, over under? I mean, if you had to bet the house right now, would you bet that Tyreek's a Dolphin next year, or would you bet he's on a different team?
I would bet he's on a different team.
Okay. Dougie P might also be on a different team because he's officially out. Finally, it only took the Jaguars, 10 more weeks than what we knew, to finally get rid of Dougie P. This Jaguars team is largely sad. Obviously, they lost Trevor Lawrence, and that didn't do them any favors. But I don't know what happened here. I have absolutely no idea what happened to the Jaguars. Like you look at the roster, and the roster didn't change a lot. You got some weapon, and obviously, Gabe Davis went out. They lost some wide receivers, but you got Brian Thomas Jr., who looks absolutely electric. He looks insane, and has played a hell of a year despite not having his QB1. So you kind of bolstered that. Travis Etienne, where did he go? Who is he? I mean, like there was a lot of things that really failed here. We were saying back in week 7. When Dougie P and the Jaguars went overseas for 2 weeks, we said don't let Dougie P back on the plane. Leave him here. Because he's not going to win you any games. He's not going to be the guy. And, they dragged it on all the way throughout this all the way through the season, and then they finally got rid of him. The Jaguars did keep their general manager, however, Trent Bulk. He is still there. This is going to be an interesting situation. We're going to kind of talk about all these coaches here because there is quite a slew of coaching changes that is on the horizon. But I wasn't surprised by this. I was surprised it took this long for the Jaguars to do this, and I'm curious to know your thoughts, Scotty.
Yeah, I mean, certainly they would have been justified in getting rid of him a long time ago. I actually think I was thinking about this, and I was like, maybe it was just a professional courtesy to Dougie P. Like, hey, there's been some adversity on this team. We're not going to fire you mid-season. We both know, everybody on earth knows you're going to be gone after the season. So just play it out. Maybe in the meantime, start thinking about some other options that you have. But then I thought, maybe they just fucking hate this guy, and they did not want to give him a 2-month paid vacation. And they're like, no, you're going to work every fucking day. Like, we paid you, you're working, and then we'll get rid of you when the season's over. And this was just a backhanded, slap to Doug Peterson. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's kind of irrelevant. Bringing in an interim coach probably wouldn't have changed anything anyway. But certainly ending the season with this bad taste in your mouth does not do anything positive for the organization.
Yeah. So there's an open vacancy at the Jags, right? There's also potentially there's some looming things going on here. Antonio Pierce, he stated he's confident he will remain the Raiders head coach. I don't know if that's the right call. I don't think Antonio Pierce is the answer here. He feels confident, but as an outsider who has no skin in the Raiders organization whatsoever, and I would be curious as to Yeti's thoughts, but I don't think this is the right call. I think you move on from Antonio Pierce. I think that we've kind of seen what, and he was the interim coach last year, right? And he was given the opportunity as a head coach, which, he did okay as an interim head coach or an interim coach, but I don't think anything's clicking there. I don't think anything is humming in the right ways. I don't think there's, going back to the whole culture thing, like I don't really feel as if they have a culture that's anybody can build around at the moment. And so while he feels confident, I don't know if I feel confident for him.
Yeah, this is another one where it's kind of a lose-lose situation for Antonio Pierce. I mean, we saw a bump when he took over as the interim coach last year, but it's difficult to say that anyone else would have had success with this Raiders organization just given the quarterback situation. I mean, they don't really have a ton of weapons on offense, save Brock Bowers. I mean, he's awesome, but it's like the offense is lacking pieces. The defense is exciting. It stayed exciting pretty much the whole year, but ultimately, would anyone, you could have put Bill Belichick on this team, and I don't know that they would have had more success. So Antonio Pierce was kind of in a rough situation. The question is, you're going to bring in a quarterback. That's their plan. Do you want to commit to Antonio Pierce for the long term? That's what they have to ask themselves, because the last thing they want is to bring in a rookie quarterback, not find success, and now they feel pressured to get rid of Antonio Pierce, find a new guy, and then the rookie quarterback in a sophomore season has to learn an entirely new system. Right, that's the same problem we see with the Bears over and over and over and over again, and they want to avoid that. So to me, it would make sense to move on and try and find one of the many established head coaches that are available right now, and then plan on keeping them for 5 years, and then say, okay, we're going to get a rookie quarterback, we're going to see how things go. If everything crashes and burns, maybe it won't go the way we want, but at least we know we're going to dedicate ourselves to one guy and give him an opportunity to develop a new quarterback for the long term. And unless they're willing to do that with Antonio Pierce, it's time to pull the plug. If they think Antonio Pierce has potential to be that guy and they're willing to commit to him, then keep him. But I don't know that we've seen enough to suggest that that's the case.
Well, Tom Brady, he does own like 1% of the Raiders. Yeah. Maybe that organization is going to kind of lean on him and say, hey, what do you think here? Right?
Yeah, he's already an owner and a commentator. Why can't he also be like a head coach and a quarterback and a commentator and an owner all on the same team?
I mean, why not? He's
already breaking all the rules. Just let him do what he wants.
Yeah. This situation, you mentioned the Bears. I want to go over and kind of talk about that. The Bears, they did request, obviously there has been a opening there since the latter part of the season here. With Eberflus out, but they did request a head coach interview with the Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing. Yes, take it. I implore you, please get him out of here. Bears, I hope nothing more than you bring this guy in, because it's going to do one or two things. It's going to be an opening for the Cardinals to maybe find a competent offensive coordinator, and it's also going to tank the shit out of the Bears and everything they have going for him. I think Drew Petzing is not a good offensive coordinator. I think that he I don't know. I look at the Cardinals as a Cardinals fan. I look at our offense this entire year, and it looked dilapidated. It looked like they had no identity. It looked like they didn't know what they were going to lean on, and they weren't utilizing the skills that this team had properly. I watched the Cardinals offense a lot, and it was the most sporadic and frustrating thing to watch because one drive they would look electric, and then the next drive you'd be like, are you guys a bunch of middle schoolers? And then you would watch them again, and I know Kyler Murray is about the size of a middle schooler, and then you would watch them again and be like, oh, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't know. I think that if the Bears did this and they brought Drew Petzing in, I think it would be a complete disservice to Caleb Williams. I think it would be a complete disservice to the team that they like. You look at the Bears roster; they have a good roster, right? They have some pieces they need to address, but like overall, they have a pretty dang good roster, right? All you need is a competent offensive guy to come in here, coach Caleb Williams up appropriately, and get this offense humming, right? And the defense, they leaned on their defense a lot this year. And you know, as much shit as we talk about Matt Eberflus and how much of a goober he was, that defense looked way worse after he left. So like at the very least, like he was holding the defense together, right? But I think this would be a huge whiff by the Bears at this point. And there's talk about Mike Vrabel, right? I think, and we'll talk about the Patriots here in just a moment, but I mean, is there anybody else that comes to mind for you for this Bears opening? And is this an appealing landing spot for any of these coaches?
Yeah, it's definitely an appealing landing spot. It seems like you could make the interior of the offensive line a little bit better. You can make some small tweaks here and there. Obviously, you have some aging assets, Keenan Allen. But ultimately, this is a team that anybody should want to coach. I mean, certainly. It seems like the potential is sky high. Among all the teams without head coaches, the Bears are, I think, top of the list, like best place to go. I don't think that they're actually going to hire Drew Petzing. I think that they have a long list of options that they can choose from. We've talked about it before. I don't necessarily think Mike Vrabel is the best option. Someone like Ben Johnson is definitely the most intriguing, but we haven't seen Ben Johnson operate on an offense without the best offensive line in football, so it's interesting. And honestly, toward the end of the season, he's kind of proven that. They've had a lot of injuries. They've had to make some stuff happen, and they've still found a lot of success over there. So I still think Ben Johnson is going to be the most sought-after potential head coach in the offseason. And Mike Vrabel, I'd put second on the list. I mean, at the very least, Mike Vrabel's going to come in and be a culture shift for you and hopefully get shit right and get your defense back to an elite level that it was toward the beginning of the season. They're capable of doing it. Yeah. So either one of those people would certainly be better than Drew Petzing. It's going to be interesting to see how the coaching carousel kind of plays out throughout the offseason because there are a lot of good coaches that are available and a lot of interesting landing spots.
You heard the name Pete Carroll before? Because
yeah.
He's throwing his hat in. He wants to go coach the Bears. He says he's already got he's got a coordinator crew ready to go, and he wants that spot.
How old is he?
He's got to be 73, 74. I'm going to guess 73.
All right, 73. Born in 1951. Dang. Here's the thing. I've said this before. I'll say it again.
Say it.
Whether we're electing a president or picking a new head coach, picking a GM, whatever, we should have an age limit. Okay, we do not want to have these like billion-year-old people in positions of authority because we don't know what they're going to be like tomorrow or a year from now. Like, let's get some young blood in there. Someone like Mike Vrabel, someone like Ben Johnson. Let's give them an opportunity. I think Pete Carroll had plenty of success in his day. He should want to just watch football like the rest of us on Sundays.
Nah, he's got the itch, man. Just like us in podcasting, he's got the itch. It's funny though. I don't know if you've seen the chatter about Ben Johnson with the Bears and how there seems to be some concern there. And obviously the Bears and the Lions and Ben Johnson is the offensive coordinator for the Lions are in the same division, right? So like he would be going to a division rival, which is definitely fun. But the overarching story here is there's chatter that Ryan Poles doesn't want him because Ryan Poles is afraid that Ben Johnson would push Ryan Poles out. I think if that's the case, I think you push Ryan Poles out.
Yeah.
I think you push Ryan Poles out.
If you're a GM and you are afraid of star power, you're not going to last very long. Like that's how you find success in this league. You got to bring in the best people. Like if you don't want the best people working for you, then what the fuck are you doing? Like you just want to be the center of attention. And honestly, if I'm Ryan Poles right now, with all the trades that were made and everything, to make the Bears roster what it is, he was kind of on top of the world. But since then, it's been nothing but downhill. And the last thing you want to do is be in the spotlight. So maybe bring someone in who draws a little bit of that media attention away from you. Could only be positive. But again, the primary thing that Ryan Poles should be worried about is finding someone who can win. And whatever star power they may or may not have should be totally irrelevant. If Ben Johnson wants to push him out, he should welcome that challenge, and hopefully become a better organization from it. And at the end of the day, all you can do is try and win. And if you get fired from being a GM, well, you made millions of dollars, so you'll be all right.
Yeah, there's chatter that Brian Flores, currently the defensive coordinator for the Vikings, former head coach of the Dolphins, there's chatter that he's definitely a candidate for this Bears organization. I think that'd be comical. I think that would be absolutely comical because he's a very good defensive coordinator. I will openly state that he is a very good defensive coordinator. But do we all not remember what happened when Tua was a rookie and how that went down? And how after he was gone, we all of a sudden saw a different Tua that was actually better, and Mike McDaniels came in and pulled a bunch of clips of Tua doing good stuff and was like, you are a good quarterback because Brian Flores, the chatter is he came in and basically mentally destroyed Tua. And it's like, what do you think he's going to do to Caleb Williams, who's arguably even more of he's got a lot going on, right? You're going to come in, you're going to bring in a defensive coordinator or a defensive head coach who has in the past belittled his rookie quarterback that he desperately needs to succeed. That would be the most Bears move for the Bears I think they could do is bring in Brian Flores.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not cool in 2025 to buy into stereotypes, but when I look at Caleb Williams and I see a guy who paints his nails and carries a purse and cries on his mom's shoulder, I don't exactly see him responding well to a tough head coach, especially
Correct.
one that's willing to just insult you in front of everybody and just be kind of a dick about it. I don't know. Caleb Williams is like the next generation of NFL player, and I think they need a type of coach. I still think having sort of a hard-nosed personality head coach is positive, but they have to be able to interact with, maybe a more sensitive generation of player better, especially in the social media age where everything you say becomes public. Like, there are no private conversations. You really kind of have to be careful with how you approach coaching. I don't see that being a good fit.
I don't either. And let's talk about the Patriots because this is part of this coaching conversation. Is the Patriots? They announced that they fired Gerard Mayo, their first-year head coach, and they requested an interview with Ben Johnson, among other coaches. Which I look at this and I almost find it pretty hysterical. I think that this Robert Kraft. He had, but when Gerard Mayo became the head coach, he said, we've been grooming this guy for 5 years. I've been eyeing him as the head coach for 5 years. And as soon as Bill Belichick was done, he was our guy. He lasted a whole season, Scotty, and then they booted him to the curb. And I've seen chatter. I've heard that, Vrabel was pulling smoke screens and he was going to interview with the Jets. He was going to interview with the Jaguars solely to put pressure on the Patriots because that's the job that he wants. And I think there's a really good chance that Vrabel ends up with the Patriots. I mean, why would you not? You look at it, obviously it's a very, it's a dynasty of an organization. It's very well known, obviously, with all the Tom Brady, Belichick stuff going on. But you look at the Patriots as a team, that's also kind of a juicy landing spot, right? Drake May has been playing really good football. And he has no other weapons around him. But you have a young, he was a rookie this year, a young rookie quarterback who shows that he can be the guy for the future. And the Patriots have one of the most favorable cap spaces in all of the NFL teams, right? So you got money to play with. You got draft capital to play with. And if you bring Vrabel in, I think it could be a recipe for success and perhaps maybe even another dynasty in the making here. I think Vrabel is going to be the Patriots head coach.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that makes the most sense. And you're right. I think the Patriots next to the Bears have one of the most intriguing one of the most intriguing landing spots for a head coach to come into, just because you can feel confident that they have their quarterback. And that's obviously the biggest piece of the puzzle. Once you do that, everything else becomes sort of easier when you have a competent quarterback at the helm. So, Vrabel, I think would be good at the Patriots. I still think, when you look at Gerard Mayo, again, we're not in the locker room, so it's difficult for us to really know how things played out. But you look at Gerard Mayo, and it's, again, what more could you have asked of a head coach than what we saw? I mean, the Patriots, despite having a bad record, it was a very positive season for them. They feel confident in their new quarterback. They saw a little bit of success, where maybe they shouldn't have seen success. And Patriots fans feel optimistic about the future, and that's pretty much all you can do when you're a quarterback or when you're a coach of a team that is, rebuilding. And that's pretty much all you can accomplish. And then they got rid of him, and there could be a million reasons why they got rid of him, but it's a little bit scary if you were Mike Vrabel, if you're one of these other coaches that are considering the Patriots, that you're like, could I have even done a better job than Gerard Mayo did? And then they just kicked him to the curb right away. And that's the guy that they supposedly wanted for half a decade. So Am I setting myself up for failure here? But I think Vrabel, if given that opportunity, would accept it. I think that's a solid landing spot, and it's something you kind of have to put your concerns aside and just hope that you can progress the organization in such a way that you end up being a Bill Belichick who's there for 20 years.
I mean, yeah, that's the epitome of it. Yeah, going back to Dougie P very quickly, there's rumors that Ben Johnson, who is, I agree with you, I think he is the number one most sought after coordinator to go into a head coaching role, and I think a lot of teams want him. There's chatter that he's really interested in the Jaguars, which could be interesting. I mean, Sarah Jessica Parker is not a phenomenal quarterback, but he's not a bad one either. And I think under the right coaching, Ben Johnson definitely could get the best out of him. I think you look at the attributes that Trevor Lawrence has versus what Jared Goff has, and I'd argue maybe Trevor Lawrence could be the better quarterback here if you coach and scheme better. And so maybe maybe he does go to the Jaguars. That could be an interesting spot. And I definitely would be much more interested in the Jaguars' success if Ben Johnson was there versus some of these other coaches that are potentially.
If you were a potential head coach, would you rather go to Jacksonville or New England?
Pays the same.
Pays the same.
That's kind of tough.
Jacksonville's warmer.
I was going to say, Jacksonville definitely climately is much more.
But hurricanes, got to worry about those.
That's true. But I feel like when you have that kind of money, you just hurricane-proof everything. Golly. I don't like the Patriots. I know. I mean, I've ever since Tom Brady and the dynasty, I've just kind of been turned off on them. But you trying to set that aside and look at the situation for what it is, maybe the Patriots. Because they have the cap space to play with, right? So they can go out and purchase some free agents. Like, I mean, humor me here for a moment. They have a very high draft capital pick. They could trade that, move down, get some extra assets there. T. Higgins is kind of up in the air, and I think he's one of the most sought after wide receivers in the event that he does hit free agency. So like, go sign T. Higgins, you get some draft picks. Like this team could be much, much better going into next season if the Patriots play their cards right. And I think that if you get the right head coach there, and that being me in this situation, so I definitely know what I'm doing, I would say probably the Patriots. But I don't think Jacksonville's a terrible landing spot either. No.
Do you agree that the order of the most enticing landing spot is Chicago, New England, Jacksonville for a new head coach?
Probably.
I think I do.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm at.
The Jets are kind of interesting, but I would probably put them fourth in that conversation.
Jets are just messy right now. I mean, once we know what's going on with Aaron Rodgers and with all that stuff, like, I don't know.
That's what makes it so messy. And
seems like there's a lot of.
It's just like a drama and theatrics involved there that, like, as a head coach, I really am not nearly as interested in. So that's kind of why I would put them farther down. I think the Bears for me would probably be number one, but
I think so too.
I think the Patriots are right behind them. So, the Jets. We were talking about the Jets and the openings they have there. Obviously, they need a head coach, right? And they have requested to interview none other than some of my favorite human beings in all of existence, Arthur Smith and Matt Nagy. So, I can't even say this with a straight face. Go get him, Tiger. Go get both those guys. Hire them both. I think Arthur Smith is a clown. I think Matt Nagy is largely a clown. I think neither of these people, who are, by the way, both former head coaches, one being the Bears and one being the Falcons, and are both offensive coordinators. Where, you might ask, Scotty? Matt Nagy, he's your offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. And then you have Arthur Smith, who is the offensive coordinator for the Steelers. I look at this and I say, what does either of these two, why are either of these two human beings appealing to you whatsoever? I mean, Arthur Smith, he completely bombshelled the Falcons. It was an atrocious season. He needed to go. He had no prowess to get things figured out. He goes with the Steelers. What has he done with the Steelers, Scotty? The Steelers have won multiple games this year by kicking field goals. They haven't even scored touchdowns. They scored field goals to win games, and that was the only points they ever got. The offense for the Steelers, terrible. Terrible. It wasn't great. Granted,
it was okay. It was all right. In some games, they were okay. I'd put them on the same level with the
top
Cardinals.
15 team.
Offensively. I mean, they're probably right there in the middle of the pack somewhere. I think once you get below 12, it's all kind of a
I
soup.
disagree. I think soup. I think he hasn't done anything with the Steelers to prove that he has the offensive prowess to get things done. And then you have Matt Nagy, who I don't think is a good offensive coordinator. And granted, the Steelers or the Chiefs are doing really well. Obviously, he's won a Super Bowl with them. But I look at the Chiefs' offense, and I think it definitely looks a lot worse than when Eric Bieniemy was there. That's and I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think that Eric Bieniemy as an offensive coordinator did a hell of a lot better job than Matt Nagy has.
Hold on, I'm seeing what the Steelers are ranked offensively.
I'm going to guess 19. Maybe worse.
Yeah, worse.
Yeah.
25th.
Yeah. And you want to go get that as your head coach? Congratulations.
He's got a mustache.
He's a freaking pervert.
Pretty cool. Okay.
I do not like Arthur Smith. And I don't think he's a good head coach. I don't think he's a good offensive coordinator. I think he's a clown. And you want to go get the 25th ranked offensive coordinator, the guy who's led the Steelers to the 25th ranked offense. That would be the most Jets thing to do. I could not fathom that being the right move for them. Like, I think Robert Saleh is leaps and bounds better of a head coach than either of these gentlemen.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you and I think, have always been on the same page about Salah, which is, they didn't find a ton of success, but he just seemed like the right guy for the job. He seemed like he was good at keeping everybody in check and building a good culture. And I know he had some blunders in the offseason with the media this year, but ultimately, I think, they kind of had to get rid of him because they were in a position where they thought they could compete for a Super Bowl, and it wasn't happening. But I don't know. I don't see him as being worse than a lot of the guys that are up for grabs.
Yeah, I wouldn't want either of those guys. The Giants. The Giants owner will neither confirm nor deny whether he is considering moving on from both the GM Joe Schoen, which I probably butchered.
Yeah,
Shane, excuse me.
Here's the thing about this, because I put this on the show notes. It's not totally true, because the Giants GM did come out and say
he said he was going to interview him. He said they were going to have some extensive conversations.
Yeah, he's like, I kind of like the direction we're going. Even though it was a disappointing season, like I still have faith in these guys. So he kind of did all but say they weren't going to lose their job. But he was asked a follow-up question about, okay, what's the timeline? If we don't see results here soon, then what's the timeline? And that he would not comment on. So it's clear. I mean, you can't be the owner of the Giants without considering all your options at this point. Like, you kind of just
Which I think is fair. I think it's fair. Both Joe Schoen and Brian Dable are kind of in question for whether they're going to be back. And he said he's going to interview both of them and see what their what their plan is. Like, if we were to keep you around, what do you envision and what do you want to see, and like what direction are we going in? Which I think is, all things considered, is fair, right? Scotty, I'm gonna give you my ideal scenario here. Drew Petzing goes to the Bears. They fire Brian Dable. Brian Dable comes over to the Cardinals. That would be wonderful. I would take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I would also, granted, I have Andy Reid. I've been blessed with Andy Reid. But if I didn't have Andy Reid, I'd be fine with Brian Dable. I still have total faith in him as a head coach. Even as
Giants
a coordinator.
fans don't.
Yeah.
A lot of Giants fans want him gone.
You kind of understand, though, like the frustration of Giants fans and them just being like, hey, put everyone's head on the chopping block. But, from an outsider perspective, there's just something about Brian Dable, the way he carries himself, the way he interacts with players. I just still have faith in Brian Dable. And I think that they would be justified, especially after the whole Hard Knock stuff. And, Joe Schoen did not come out of that looking good, especially after Saquon decides to go out and have the season he had. But I really don't think you can put a lot of the blame on Brian Dable, just given the situation he was given as a head coach. I think if you're going to be fair and you're going to look at it from an objective perspective, you can't put a lot of the failures on Brian Dable at this point in time, and you haven't really given him that opportunity to find success with the organization.
You're going to fire anybody, it's Joe Schoen. That's my belief, because he did fumble the bag. He fumbled the bag insanely with the whole Saquon thing, and that was a bad look. But like, I just think Joe Shane is not a good GM. I think he largely has been a hindrance to the success of the Giants and where they need to go and the players they need to get, et cetera, et cetera. I think Brian Daboll's a play caller is phenomenal. I think he is a great head coach, and I think if the Giants were to move on from Brian Daboll, I don't think they're going to find a better head coach than Brian Daboll, given the nastiness of what that team is and the trajectory of where they potentially could go. Bengals. They did fire their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. It took them all of the entire season to figure out that their defense was absolutely terrible, and which admittedly, like you look at, I'm just going to state some stuff here. Joe Burrow played phenomenally. Joe Burrow this entire season has played insane. This has been a career year for him. Should probably be in the MVP conversation more than he is, but given the Bengals record, he's not. Or he's not nearly as high as I think he probably should be. Jamar Chase. You ever heard of a triple crown winner, Scotty? Because that would be Jamar Chase. He has also had a career year, leads the league in touchdowns, receiving yards, catch. Like, the guy did it all, right? And then, I can't remember the guy's name. He, the defensive player, Trent McDuff. No, what is his name? He's a defensive lineman. Yes, thank you. He holds the sack record for the year. He is the number one. He's the sack king, as we'll dub him.
The sack king?
That's the sack king.
I wish I could be a sack king.
He got the most sacks out of any defensive lineman this year. And the Bengals, they're still out, Scotty. So Lou Anarumo, I think it was probably a really good call to move on from him because this Bengals team looked disgusting for a large part of the year. The Bengals defense, they had glimpses of hope, and they shined sometimes, but overall were a huge component to the reason that they lost a lot of their games.
Yeah,
so
I mean, this Bengals defense, and honestly, NFL fans are not piling on as much as they should with the Bengals defense because you keep hearing like, oh, they improved at the end of the season, blah, blah, blah. If you go back and look at the games where the defense played well, almost every time it was against just a pitiful offense, almost every time. And it was like, okay, they could play Russell Wilson so good. They could play a rookie quarterback in his first ever start in New England so well. But, man, they just sucked against competent offenses. And that's why, yes, firing the defensive coordinator is a no-brainer. It probably should have happened in like week 9. But I don't know that you can place all the blame on him because it just seems like this is an organization. I mean, it's been said for a long time that this is an organization that's cheap. They don't like to pay people. They've obviously invested heavily in Joe Burrow. They've invested heavily in Jamar Chase. They're really going to have to decide what to do on T. Higgins. And, we're going to talk about that more in a second. But I think that they were set up for failure on defense, and they really, really need to address that. And getting rid of the defensive coordinator, step 1. And then step 2 is, who knows? Like, there are probably 75 steps to get them back to where they need to be competing for Super Bowls.
Well, yeah, and we're talking about the Bengals. I mean, they won against the Steelers, by the way, 19-17. And they were watching on Sunday just as heavily, if not more interested than you were, regarding this Broncos and Chiefs game because they needed the Chiefs to win, which, golly, man. Broncos 38, Chiefs 0. You couldn't even kick a fucking field goal. I mean, Carson Wentz looked terrible. Yeah, I know. So, like I said, they beat the Steelers. They're not going to go to the playoffs because the Broncos won. So essentially, Kansas City, they knocked the Bills out of the playoffs yet again in a roundabout way.
The Bengals, but yeah,
or Bengals.
Hopefully the Bills. Maybe a little foreshadowing.
That's going to be interesting.
But yes, it brings me so much joy to think about all these Bengal fans watching the Chiefs second string like it's their own game. Like just like they hate us so much, and they were just rooting so hard for Carson Wentz and then they had to watch the Chiefs get blown out. Like, obviously, I'm a Chiefs fan. Watching us get blown out was bad. I wish we would have fought a little bit harder, but the degree of sadness that I feel is nothing compared to these Bengals fans who hate us so much and then had to just watch us lose by 38 points to the Broncos to keep them out of the playoffs. The whole situation is very, very funny to me. And if we would have beat the Broncos, it would have been equally funny, but, making fun of Broncos fans. But losing in this fashion is very funny for when I think about Bengals fans. It's very funny.
I think it was the right move, though. I really do. Like, if you were the Chiefs, I think you went into this game and you said, well, let's pick the lesser of two evils. Who do we want to see in the playoffs? Do we want to see the Bengals in the playoffs, or do we want the Bengals to get in, or do we want the Broncos to get in? And I think ultimately, if I was to pick which one is the more threatening team, I would say it's the Broncos. Or
Honestly,
the Bengals. The Bengals.
Yeah, I think both of them have a chance to be threatening, but in all likelihood, I mean, as a Chiefs fan, regardless, we're probably not going to see either of them. If things play out like they're supposed to in the playoffs, we're probably not going to see either of them. So, I don't think it was some grand conspiracy to decide to lose. I think Carson Wentz and the rest of our second string are second stringers for a reason, and the Broncos are a competent team. So we'll see how they perform. I got to give my flowers to Allen. He's not here, but he said at the beginning of the year, when I didn't have the Broncos going to the playoffs this year, you didn't have the Broncos going to the playoffs. None of us had the Broncos being anything, Be careful on the flowers, though, because I got lots of tape of Allen talking mad shit on Bo Nix and saying that he's going to be ass and that he watched him at Auburn and he's going to be bad. And, yes, he had a little more faith in Sean Payton than us, but he hated Bo Nix.
Bo Nix looks really good, by the way.
He does.
Bo Nix looks really good. This is going to pay me to say, I'm going to eat some crow here, Scotty.
Spit it out.
Sean Payton, I think you are a scumbag piece of shit.
Oh, so nothing's changed.
However, you might know what you're doing as a coach, okay? You might know what you're doing as a coach. And while I still don't like you as a human being, I do respect you as a coach because what you've done this year is nothing short of impressive. I didn't have the Bengals, I keep saying the Bengals. I didn't have the Broncos doing anything this year. I had the Broncos as one of the bottom of the barrel teams, and here we are talking about them in the playoffs. Bo Nix looks really good, and you get him some weapons, get him some more weapons other than Cortland Sutton. I'm curious as a Chiefs fan, obviously not this season, right? I think we're okay this season, but 2 years from now. Is there a little bit of a worry that the Broncos could really start to dominate this division or certainly be a huge threat to the Chiefs given what we're seeing play out here with a lackluster roster?
Well, I think the whole division is going to get tougher in coming years. There's no doubt about that. I think, whenever you can say the same thing about Patrick Mahomes that we always say about Josh Allen. As long as you got Patrick Mahomes, I mean, the Chiefs are going to be a competitive team. Whether or not they're going to maintain dominance is another question. But the division itself, obviously the Broncos are on the up and up. I think you could make a competent argument that the Chargers are on the right path. The Raiders, depending on who they can get as their quarterback and how that plays out, they do have a while. They're way less, we're way less confident in them than everybody else. But certainly, the Broncos are not only a playoff team, they're a team you don't want to play in the playoffs. I mean, they're a team that could win games, and there's just no doubt about it. Their defense is very good, and Bo Nix, I actually heard before this game, one of the announcers say that Bo Nix kind of reminds them of Josh Allen. And at first I was like, okay, let's pump the brakes a little bit. Nobody's Josh Allen. But then watching the game, I couldn't get that comparison out of my head a little bit. I was like, oh shit. He kind of does look a little bit like Josh Allen in the way that he plays.
Yeah.
And, obviously he's got a long way to go before that comparison is real, but certainly you have to be impressed with Bo Nix. He has played very, very well and with very few weapons. It's sort of like CJ Stroud last year where it's Bo Nix made Cortland Sutton into a legit wide receiver.
Yeah.
One. And we haven't seen that success from Cortland Sutton. Obviously, he's been good, but we haven't seen him take that step until this season. And it reminds me a little bit of CJ Stroud. We're like, oh shit, this guy gets in there, and now all of a sudden this offense is something to be contended with, and you have to start looking at these other pieces and take them seriously because Bo Nix elevates everybody to that, to such a degree. So as a Broncos fan, you're ecstatic right now. Obviously this is the first time you made the playoffs in almost 10 years since Peyton Manning. You're feeling very, very good about the future, and rightly so.
Well, we're talking about the future. Let's go back to the Bengals for just a moment, because what does 2025 look like here? I mean, Zach Taylor, question mark, right? Are they going to move on from him, or are they going to keep him? You got T. Higgins, who has said that he would be willing to potentially take a pay cut to stick around. Defense doesn't look great. I mean, what are the Bengals looking like here? We'll start with T. Higgins, because I think that's really the linchpin of a lot of this for me. What are your thoughts? Is he going to be a Bengal next season, or you think he's going to hit free agency?
It all depends on the contract. Obviously, T. Higgins is demanding a lot, but if he's willing to take a pay cut, that could change the conversation. His skill demands a lot, and I think he could get a pretty significant chunk of change at a lot of, with a lot of teams. It's my thought that if you have to pay T. Higgins his market value, it's time to move on. That might be an unpopular opinion because obviously T. Higgins is incredible. He's a great weapon. You want him on your team. But what we saw from the defense this year needs to be addressed because this offense looked as good as it can look. I mean, there's no better that this offense could be. And you still weren't able to make the playoffs. Okay, so something has to change. You have to do something. And you need to get some defensive weapons, and you have to pay them. Like, that's just the bottom line. And in all likelihood, if you're going to pay market value for T. Higgins, you're going to have to make sacrifices on defense. And you can make the argument that maybe you don't have to have superstars on defense. You just have to get way more competent. And maybe that doesn't cost a ton of money because your offense is so good that maybe your defense doesn't have to be great. They just kind of have to be middle of the pack. But I would argue that if this organization is going to take the next step and compete for Super Bowls on a consistent basis, or at least be a playoff team on a consistent basis, they have to mature a little bit, and they have to recognize that all the highlight reel stuff is great for your fans. It sells a lot of jerseys, but if you want to win Super Bowls, you need to have defense. And if you have to cut your wide receiver 2 to make that happen, you can still keep Jamar Chase, you can still keep Joe Burrow. That's what you have to do. Now, again, if T. Higgins says, hey, I'm willing to take a lot less money so I can play on this team because I like this team, I like our chances, that changes the equation. But in my opinion, you just can't pay market value for T. Higgins and keep him on your roster if you're the Bengals.
I agree with that, and I think that's I think that's a tough pill to swallow because I don't think but Bengals fans certainly don't want to lose him, and it's fun, right? Like it's fun having T and Jamar both there with Joey B slinging it, and like when you have 2 wide receiver ones, like yeah, it gets really great. But I think your argument is completely valid. And I think that I hope Bengals fans are listening to this and saying like, yeah, okay, this sucks, I don't like hearing this, but there's some sound reasoning behind it that makes me believe that maybe you're right? And so, franchise tag the guy, trade him, get your value for him, and then move on. Like go find another wide receiver too. Right? Go find somebody who's maybe not T. Higgins because that's going to be hard to find a wide receiver too. But go find another competent wide receiver too, and start addressing some of the other issues that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
What else we got here, Scotty? Let's keep looking. The Panthers. They put up 44 points on the Falcons.
This made me so mad.
Are you okay?
This was an infuriating game to watch for like a whole bunch of reasons, but primarily, I mean, I guess I'll start with number one. I've been high on the Falcons all season. Obviously, my optimism has dwindled a lot as the season went on.
Sure.
But I started out pretty high on the Falcons. The second part here is Kickoff Karaoke, which we'll talk about, in a little bit. But this game was one that I needed to secure not having to sing the National Anthem. And so I was watching this game as a Falcons fan. I've always kind of liked the Falcons. I won't say always. This year I've kind of liked the Falcons, and I've wanted them to find success. But I was watching it as a Falcons fan. And let me tell you, Falcons fans, I'm really sorry because it sucks being a Falcons fan. That was ass. Because this is a team, Michael Penix played great. I mean, yeah. I don't remember the stats now. He threw for over 300 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He did have an interception, but he played really good. And there's just no way, like as a Falcons fan, if I were to tell you, hey, in this game, guess what? Penix is going to have over 300 yards. He's going to have multiple touchdowns. Bijan is going to run for like 180 yards. He's going to have multiple touchdowns. Drake London is going to have like 180 yards receiving, multiple touchdowns. You're still going to lose. This defense...
To the Panthers, by the way.
To the Panthers. Like, that's just the straw that broke the camel's back. Because against anybody, when you're putting up those kind of numbers, when you put up 38 points, you should win that game, unless you're the Bengals. Like, you should win that game. And they let Bryce Young do whatever they want. And if you're looking at the stat line, you're looking at the score, you're thinking, wow, Bryce Young just took another step forward. Like, more reason to be impressed. And I don't want to take anything away from Bryce Young because he did play really, really well. This Panthers team is becoming more and more feisty, which is great. But watching the game, you're going to realize that Bryce Young was playing on air. He was playing 7-on-7 defense, where the defense was like, I don't know, they had their legs tied together because every receiver was wide open. Like, he was hitting receivers without a defender within 5 to 10 yards every single time. It was crazy to watch. Like, this Falcons defense just completely fell apart. And it was infuriating. I mean, it was an offensive shootout. Typically, fans kind of like those, but at some point, you got to be like, "Holy shit! Like, what is going on with the Falcons' defense right now?" Because they cannot keep up with Bryce Young. And I just want to read you. Let me just read you some of the people who caught passes from Bryce Young. Okay, people who caught touchdowns. Miles Sanders. Okay, not a surprise. He's pretty good. Tommy Tremble, David Moore. They caught touchdowns. Receivers: Jalen Coker, Jatavian Sanders, Felipe Franks, Mike Boone, they caught passes. And not only were they catching passes, they were dicing up the Falcons defense. You haven't heard of half of these people. This is insane that the Falcons defense let this happen. And ultimately, it wouldn't have mattered in the grand scheme because the Bucs ended up winning, but they were playing for a chance to play in the playoffs, and they allowed this to happen to them. It's crazy.
So let me ask you this. Do you think it's a failure of Raheem Morris, who, by the way, was a defensive coordinator for the Rams, and is now the Falcons head coach? Or do you think this is a story for the ages of Dave Canales, the head coach for the Panthers? And I bring this up, and you laugh, and it is humorous, but are the Panthers going to be a team? Are the Panthers actually going to be an NFL team moving forward, and like somebody who or an organization that we maybe eventually we stop laughing at and start putting some real legitimacy to what they're doing? Because Bryce Young has looked good. Bryce Young has looked like Bryce Young. By the way, this is the same quarterback that was benched earlier on in the season for Andy Dalton because they were like, we don't know. Like we're gonna bench him. We're gonna play Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton gives us the best chance to succeed. I don't know if perhaps Bryce Young went on an ayahuasca trip and refound himself. I'm not entirely sure, but this does not look like the same Bryce Young that we saw to begin the season. This does not look like the same Bryce Young that played last year. This Bryce Young looks like he's having fun playing football, which is nice to see. Like I love when players actually look like they enjoy what they're doing and enjoy playing the game. He looks like he's having fun out there, right? Are the Panthers something?
Here's what scares me. I'm going to be pessimistic. I'm good at that.
Okay.
When we saw Bryce Young get drafted to the Panthers, number 1 overall pick, like the expectations were through the roof. And yes, this was a team that got the number 1 overall pick. So it was a bad team. They didn't have a lot of weapons. You have to temper your expectations. NFL fans are bad at doing that. But the expectations were through the roof. There was a ton of pressure. And Bryce Young sucked. And granted, didn't have a lot of options. But Bryce Young played pretty bad. Bad enough that in a second season early on, they benched him. And it was so bad that pretty much everybody thought he's done with the Panthers. They weren't going to get rid of him. Like, that was basically a foregone conclusion for pretty much everybody. And then, when he gets brought back in, there are no expectations. Everyone expects you to suck. And when there are no expectations, it's a lot easier to have fun playing the game. Like, it's a lot easier to be like, win or lose, who gives a shit? If I lose, I'm going somewhere else. That seems like that might happen anyway. If we win, then great. I'm worried that Bryce Young might be a bit of a head case. I'm worried that when the pressure is high, we might see him sort of revert back to his old self. Now, this is something that we're not going to know until time goes. There's certainly... Sure. It's certainly true that he has improved a lot since he became the starter again. He looks a lot more competent. But I also think, I've said this before, but we're grading them on a curve a little bit because we're comparing Bryce Young to Bryce Young of last year, who was terrible, like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And now we see him, he throws for 250 yards, and we're like, holy shit, like Bryce Young is killing it. So I think the jury is still out a little bit. Now, he's going to be the quarterback. I mean, obviously, Panthers fans should feel excited about that. They certainly have an opportunity to build this organization up. They're feisty now with not a lot of weapons, so they can certainly be better. But I am a little bit concerned that once we get halfway through next season, maybe they have a winning record, maybe they're looking at the playoffs. I'm concerned that the pressure mounting will result in a collapse of Bryce Young a little bit. And that's just totally conjecture because I don't know the guy, but
sure,
I'm worried about that.
That's an interesting and one that I really hadn't thought of, to be honest with you. So I think it certainly is an interesting conversation. Just like you said, we're not going to know until time tells, right? Like, we're not going to know until you're sitting under the fire and you have to deal with that. So it is interesting. I don't know. Neither of us know how much ground that is, but that is an interesting theory regarding the future of the Panthers. What about the Falcons, Scotty? As somebody who, going into the season, you were quite excited about the Falcons. Admittedly, I was too. Perhaps maybe not quite as high as you were, but I definitely thought they were a playoff contending team. We thought Kirk Cousins was going to come in and be the quarterback whisperer that they needed. Obviously, we've discussed how that kind of played out, but what are we thinking about next season? Like, are we optimistic? Do we think Penix is going to turn this team around? And where are your thoughts regarding the Falcons going into next season?
Yeah, I don't know. The Falcons are very confusing. I mean, just it's sort of similar. Obviously, they've had more success than like the Jets and the Bears, but it feels very similar to those conversations. Like, on paper, they look really good. They look like they should be competitive. it almost makes me feel like there's something behind the scenes that's causing a lot of the problems. And, last year we were saying they're a quarterback away. Well, maybe they were a quarterback and a culture away. We got a new head coach, a defensive head coach who just gets absolutely fucking shellacked by the Panthers when they're fighting for a playoff spot. Like, that's not a good sign at all.
Yeah.
And I am not, I've said this before, despite how optimistic I was on the Falcons, I have never really been bought in on Morris. I don't know that we've seen enough to be like, yeah, this is the guy. And then on top of that, all the confusing moves of like drafting Penix after paying Kirk Cousins and then switching from Kirk Cousins to Penix right in crunch time. Like, it just seems confused. Everything just doesn't really make sense. It's not meshing together. So, this is a team that with the talent that they have could certainly be a contender. I mean, we saw that this year. They didn't play well all year and they were still almost a playoff team. So like the ceiling is pretty high, but at this point, like my confidence is just shaken. I don't really have faith in the front office. I don't really have faith in the head coach. Now I don't have faith in the defense at all. And I just don't know. Penix looks good, though. I mean, they have reason to be optimistic about that. I mean, they got to pay Kirk Cousins for 3 more years to sit on the bench for some reason. But Penix is playing well, and he's getting a lot of the weapons involved to save Kyle Pitts, who still really hasn't done anything.
I think it's Kyle Pitts' problem. I think Kyle Pitts is ass. I think he's
well,
I'm off the train again.
I've said Kyle Pitts no matter what, so I can't. I don't have the option to get off the train.
I understand.
I said no matter what. So.
Bucks beat the Saints 27-19. They did get themselves in a little bit of a bind early in this game, but they ended up in the fourth quarter coming back, beating the Saints, and are playoff bound. So the question here is, and I think I already know the answer, but do the Saints draft another quarterback this year? I think absolutely 100%. I think there is without a doubt in my mind that until they figure out that quarterback position, and at least like you look at rookie quarterbacks, right? And I think when a team drafts a rookie quarterback, it more so than any other player in any other position, it's the start of a new era, right? Because that quarterback role is so pivotal in the success or failure of these teams. And so you look at the Saints and it's like they don't have a lot to hang their hat on. Derek Carr's not the guy. You have their tight end who's also their running back, who's also their receiver, who's also their quarterback sometimes, and he's like 35, right? Their quarterback options are slim picking. I think they desperately need a quarterback. You agree with that?
Yeah. The Saints have just, I mean, we've had the same conversation about them since we started this podcast 3 or 4 years ago, whenever that was.
They're the same team.
They're in cap hell still. I mean, it
Sean
seems
Payton,
like they need to make moves, but I don't know what moves they can make. Spencer Rattler looks okay, and Derek Carr sometimes looks okay. But you're not expecting them to compete for anything anytime soon. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is the best weapon on this team. He's old now. He keeps getting injured. I don't know. If I was in a situation, like if I had to choose which place to go be a GM, the Saints are dead last on the list because I don't know. Yeah. You have to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to get out of the hole that they're in and figure out how to be successful again. And somehow, we always say salary cap's not real, and
it's not.
Like Exhibit A is the Saints because they've been in salary cap hell for forever, and it's just like it seems like there are no repercussions outside of just not winning games. So I don't have any idea what to do about the Saints. I expect them to get a quarterback. I mean, it seems like they have to try, and maybe the way to get out of cap hell is to get a quarterback on a rookie deal who can win you some games. But I don't know. It seems like a mess.
It is a mess. That whole organization's a mess. But going to the Bucks, you expect the Bucks to make a deep playoff berth here?
They're a little bit schizophrenic too. I see the Bucks very similarly to the Steelers. Obviously, it looks different on the field, but it's a team that is feisty and they can contend with pretty much anybody, but you don't really expect them to string together a bunch of wins to the point where they're going to be a Super Bowl team when they don't have Tom Brady as their quarterback. So, I wouldn't bet the house against the Bucks in pretty much any game, but I'm also not real confident in them overall. We do have to take a second to talk about Mike Evans because he had his 11th straight season of over 1,000 yards.
Buddy.
That dude, I'm glad that, it's always, when he hits that 1,000-yard mark, then on Twitter for a couple days, people are praising him, but it still just seems like he is so underappreciated. He's not in the conversation with these elite weapons, and save the year he had Tom Brady or the couple years he had Tom Brady, he hasn't really had quarterbacks either, and he's still just producing at such a high level. That guy is awesome. So part of me says, as long as he's on the offense, seems like they're going to find some offensive success at least some of the time and win some games that maybe you don't expect.
I don't expect much from him. I'm going to be honest. I think because of largely due to what you mentioned being schizophrenic, I think that's the team is like, you don't know what you're going to get. And, playoff football it's upon us, right? You have to be playing your A game. You have to come prepared week in and week out throughout the playoffs. And like, this is it, right? I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Baker. I'm definitely happy for Mike Evans, but I don't think they're certainly within the realm of even the championship, let alone the Super Bowl. So let's go over to the Jets because congratulations, they won a game. Scotty, I don't know if you knew this. They won 32-20 against the Dolphins. Granted, the Dolphins were starting Snoop, but Aaron Rodgers he looked decent. 23 for 36, 274 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an INT. Do you see that throwback play? The
it
Rodgers
was the dumbest
to
thing.
Adams,
it was the
Rodgers
dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Adams again.
Yeah, if you didn't see it, here's what happened. They did this like end around double pass play where Davante Adams came in motion. Aaron Rodgers snapped it and pitched it to Davante Adams. He ran all the way to the sideline, threw it all the way back across the field to Aaron Rodgers, who was trying to look for Garrett Wilson downfield, but he was covered. So then he decided, okay, I know I just got this pass from across the field from Davante Adams, but I'm going to throw it back across the
Nobody's
field
gonna
again
expect this.
to Davante Adams. Yeah, he's thinking 3D chess, but in reality, it was the dumbest thing on earth. And then Davante Adams catches it and then just gets absolutely like it'd be funny if Davante Adams just kind of got pushed out of bounds or whatever for a loss of 5 yards. He got fucking smoked.
Destroyed.
I'm glad they went on to win this game and put up some offense because this play was like a microcosm of their offense all season, which is like it's flashy. Look at this crazy stuff. Oh, it's a loss of 5 yards, and Davante Adams almost died. Like that's been the Jets' offense, and this play was that. Like I was laughing hysterically when I watched it happen because it was like this is just demonstrating maybe Davante Adams is kind of old, Aaron Rodgers is definitely old. They think they can still do it, and they're just getting fucking smoked. But they ended up playing pretty good.
Hey.
The Jets played a good game.
Win's a win, man, and I'm going to ask again, as I continuously have this entire season, does Rodgers come back? Was this the last game for Aaron Rodgers? I don't think we saw him and Adams holding each other and walking off the field and glazing up into the stands, and the sun was setting like he did when he was with the Packers with, what's his name?
Cobbs.
Yeah, Randall Cobbs. So that didn't happen. But I mean, Rodgers has come out and said, like, he's having a lot of fun here. He really enjoys being with the Jets. It's been the best 2 years of his career so far. Is that all smokescreen and BS comparative to what the Jets have been and how Aaron Rodgers has played this whole season? And
yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers hates his life right now. There's no doubt about it.
You think so?
Definitely. Whether or not he hates his life enough to retire or try and go to a new team, I don't really know. And honestly, Davante Adams being there kind of muddies the water a little bit. Like they've been trying to reunite. They finally did. I don't know if he's going to be like, all right, deuces, like we tried. It's like, see you later. So I don't have any idea. He's an enigma. We all know that. We have no idea what's going through his head.
He's got a show about it, actually.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers
is that what it's
Enigma.
called?
Yeah.
That's what it's called?
That is legitimately what it's called. Aaron Rodgers Enigma.
Well named. But
yeah,
so I don't know. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised with any of the three options. If he's like, hey, I tried the Jets, I'm going to try something else. It'd be hilarious if he made it to the Vikings and just followed Brett Favre. But I don't know. Or if he says, I'm done, I wouldn't be surprised. Or if he says, let's try and run it back one more time, maybe draft a young quarterback so they can learn from the GOAT, Aaron Rodgers. Who knows?
That is, talking about Aaron Rodgers Enigma, and you mentioned them drafting a rookie. I will say, I did watch the whole Aaron Rodgers Enigma. I finally finished it. And I will say, I do have a lot of respect for what he did with Jordan Love compared to what happened to Aaron Rodgers with Brett Favre. Brett Favre basically had kind of come in and said, like, my job is not to teach this guy how to do anything. Like, I'm not going to do that. And, they showed some clips and kind of talked about it a little bit and how Aaron Rodgers was, as a rookie and, when his time when Brett Favre was also with the Packers and how he was kind of like, wasn't treated wonderfully to Brett Favre. And so then you see Jordan Love come in and a similar situation happens and the complete opposite of what Aaron Rodgers did. Aaron Rodgers kind of took Jordan Love under his wing a little bit and was like, hey man, like this is how things work. And like, it was just kind of nice to see. And as much as we like to paint Aaron Rodgers as the bad guy, that was a really bright spot for me where I was like, okay, like that, because you look at the situation and like Aaron Rodgers had no idea that they were drafting Jordan Love. Like he had no clue. He was sitting on his couch watching the draft and like got a text message from his agent right before it happened. And you look at that and I try and put myself in Aaron Rodgers' shoes, which is a weird, scary place to be. But he was like, okay, like they drafted my replacement, and that could build resentment and bitterness, and those things that probably Favre had experienced at that moment. And instead, he said, you know what? Like I've been through that. I know what it's like to be the new kid on the block, and I'm not going to treat him like that. So, all is to say, if the Jets did that, I think Rodgers would be a really good person to learn from and whatnot. However, I don't think he's going to get the opportunity because I don't think Rodgers is going to play. I think this is done. I think he's done. I don't think the Jets want him back. I really don't think any team necessarily wants Aaron Rodgers for his athletic prowess on the field because it looked abysmal. Nathaniel Hackett has been his offensive coordinator multiple times now, and what was this season? What did you do as an offensive coordinator that put anything on the paper for Jets fans to believe that you're going to figure this out, right? Like Aaron Rodgers has not looked good all season long. He has not played well all season long, and I think that he hasn't put enough tape out there for a team that needs a bridge quarterback to say, let's go get Aaron Rodgers, aside from his mental acuity of the game. Like that's the only reason I think you would go get Aaron Rodgers. And then at that point, what do you have, a backup quarterback? Because he's physically, he hasn't shown that he can get it done consistently and at a very high level like he has in the past.
Yeah, and I don't know what the Jets are thinking, because I know it's been kind of common, and you just said it, like the Jets don't want him back. I don't know that that's true. I think Jets fans, maybe they're delusional, but I think Jets fans still think that this is a team that can compete. And yes, it looked pathetic this year, and there was a lot of things that were going wrong, but you can always fall back on, well, Robert Salah wasn't the guy. We fired him halfway through the season. What team is competent all the way through a season without a head coach? Right? I do think that if I were the Jets GM, I think my plan would be, let's draft a quarterback. We lost a lot of games this year. That gives us a unique opportunity to draft a quarterback. Let's draft a quarterback. Let's hang on to Aaron Rodgers one more year, and let's just see if there's any sort of spark here. Because the alternative is just saying this was all a mistake, and we're going to blow it up right now, and we're going to have a rookie quarterback, and we'll just see what happens. And then you might end up with Zach Wilson for 3 more years. And like that doesn't make anybody excited. So I do think that that's probably the best course of action for the Jets, and it may be that they go and win 4 games next year, and then it was just definitively all a failure. But ultimately, I think if you're the Jets organization, that's kind of the best way forward in my mind.
I mean, you still got to find a whole coaching staff, right? Like that's the other part of this whole puzzle is like, what do you do from a coaching staff perspective? And then what does that coaching staff want to do given the players and the situation regarding Rodgers, Adams, the whole 9 yards? Garrett Wilson wants out. Garrett Wilson said that. He's like, hey, I want out of here. Like, this is not it. And it's tough for me to blame him when you look at the dysfunction that the Jets have been and throughout his tenure with them. And it's like,
Garrett Wilson was a better receiver with Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
Like,
that's just kind of sad, right? Because you went and got a Super Bowl winning MVP level quarterback that obviously happened years prior, but he hasn't looked great. Right, he wants out. So, like, I don't know. It's not a good situation for the Jets, and there's a lot for them to figure out. I'm interested to see how this plays out, and as more news breaks, I'm sure we'll be chatting about it more. But the last game here, Scotty, that I want to discuss today is the Lions and the Vikings.
Oh yeah, praise be Dan Campbell. I've always said
it. Is that what you've always said? The Lions, Scotty, they didn't beat the Vikings. They grabbed them by their helmets, by the horns on the top of those Viking helmets, and they smashed their fucking head into the ground 31-9. This was not what I had coming, not what Alan had coming. Perhaps Scotty had it coming because you had picked the Lions to win this game. I really thought the Vikings were going to win this game, or at least be much more competitive than this. I had the circle. I was very excited for this game. It was there was a lot of stakes in this game for both teams. Both teams are obviously in the same division. They're going to the playoffs. They were fighting for seeding, and the Vikings really shut down. And I think the other thing to note here is this was huge for Sam Darnold. This game was a very big game for Sam Darnold, right? Because if Sam Darnold comes out, looks incredible, looks like he's playing at a really high level, he's playing for his next contract in this game. This game, more than maybe arguably a lot of the other games that he's played this season, this game was a huge, huge game for him. Because if he comes out and he lights it up, that I think that shows the world, okay, Sam Darnold is and or could be at least a bridge quarterback for us. He's a competent quarterback for us. He didn't look great. Justin Jefferson did not look great. In fact, he had 3 receptions for 54 yards. Sam Darnold threw 166 yards and nothing for touchdowns. It was an ass kicking. It was the definition of grit via Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I'm going to make a reference here that like maybe 0.1% of our audience will understand. But if you guys play chess, this is what happened to the Vikings. The Lions came out and played the London system. All they did was come out and restrict the ever-living shit out of the Vikings offense. Like, yes, the Lions offense is good. We've known that all year. The Lions defense was a bit in question because they've had a ton of injuries. They've had to move people around. They've had to make late season acquisitions like to try and complete this unit while they're attempting to make the Super Bowl. And it was like in question because Sam Darnold's been playing well. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is a superstar. And the takeaway from this game was the lockdown defense that the Lions played. Like it was,
mind you, they're missing a lot of defensive pieces too. By the way,
they are, and they got Anzalone back. Like they lost I forget number 0. I forget his name now, but yeah, but they lost more pieces, and they came out with a game plan, and that game plan was we're going to get some penalties, but we are going to play physical against this Vikings offense, and we're going to throw receivers around, and we're going to be all over them. And yeah, they got a couple penalties, but Justin Jefferson was not open the entire game, and they were playing him in man coverage, which you don't do that against Justin Jefferson. You don't play Justin Jefferson in man coverage because he beats you all the time, and he did not get free at all. This Lions defense just squeezed the life out of the Vikings, and the Lions, through most of the game, also were kind of struggling on offense, right? Because the Vikings defense is very good. Like, it took them a while to get going, but ultimately, the Vikings defense broke before the Lions defense, and the Lions defense was just impressive as hell. Like, that, what I saw during this game was a team that can win the Super Bowl. Like
I would agree with that. 100%.
They are complete, and their defense is terrifying. And, we've seen some games where their defense did not perform that well, but they knew that this was a huge game. This was a game to win the division. This was a game to get a bye. Like this, all the chips are on the table, and they came out and played lights out. This is a Super Bowl contending team, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely back in on that mantra. I had some concerns for like the last couple weeks. I'm like, maybe not. This just reinvigorated the fire within me that Dan Campbell, he's got it. This Lions team is scary. They're a team you do not want to see in the playoffs because they're Super Bowl contending. Like that, I can't say that about all of these teams that we're going to talk about here with the wild card weekend, but the Lions are not somebody that anybody wants to play. Scotty, you beat me in Kickoff Karaoke. Okay. So I'm going to let you go ahead. Take the reins here. Discuss Kickoff Karaoke. Let them know.
Well, I just want, our listeners should know, the Brainiacs, the faithful know. I was dominating Kickoff Karaoke for a majority of the season. Wasn't even close. But I thought that was kind of boring. So I decided to lose a bunch of games in a row, make it close. In fact, I made it so close that it came down to the very last game of the regular season, Lions versus Vikings. I had to win just one of 3 games that you and I differed on last week. And first the noon games came around, I lost. Then the 3 o'clock games came around. The Cardinals decided to put up almost 50 points out of nowhere. I lost. And then the last game of the season, it all comes down to this. And the Lions and Dan Campbell said, I know you talked a lot of shit on us, Scotty, but we forgive you. And we're going to make sure that you do not have to sing the national anthem and embarrass yourself in front of all of your viewers, which was really nice of them.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. Kickoff Karaoke, I'm sure I would love to do it again next year. I will be singing the national anthem live for all of you over on X right before the Super Bowl. So you're going to get to hear these vocals belch out some of the most beautiful words known to all of the United States. And
I will say, sorry to interrupt.
That's
I was watching this game with my family, and they don't watch our podcast, which is their loss, obviously.
Yeah.
But they did not know about Kickoff Karaoke, and I informed them that hey, we really need the Lions to win this game.
There's stakes in this
and
game.
they immediately turned against me, and they were all rooting for the Vikings the entire time, which was devastating. But I showed them in the end, so it all worked out.
You did. Honestly, I'm really glad it came. Like, it literally came down to the last game of the regular season to determine it. Like, it couldn't have gone any better. Like, it was what a way to go. And I think the icing on the cake is it was the Lions, who you historically have had some grievances with, and you chose them, and I went against them. Largely because I had to, but also because I really did think the Vikings were going to win this game.
The narrative was good either way, because either it was going to be the Lions losing when I bet on them just to rub it in my face that I've talked so much shit, or it was going to be the Cardinals losing, forcing you in. So those were the two options that would have been the funniest, and it came down to the last day. Couldn't ask for anything more. If you stuck around through Kickoff Karaoke, hopefully you're happy, and you're going to be very happy when Hunter's singing the National Anthem for you.
Most people probably won't be. They'll probably turn it off due to the vocals. But congratulations to Alan. He came through. He took first place in Kickoff Karaoke, so congratulations to you. All right, let's do Wild Card Weekend, and we're going to get the heck out of here. So, Saturday, Chargers at the Texans, 3:30 game. Who are you taking, Scotty?
I'm going to take the Chargers.
Okay.
I think if the Texans were healthy, I would 100% take the Texans. I still think the Chargers are pretty overrated. I think that they have been gifted a playoff berth by having a ridiculously easy schedule, especially through the first 10 weeks. But there's no doubt that the Chargers are a talented team, and anybody can win this game. The Texans the injuries are piling up, and it seems like Jim Harbaugh's got the championship pedigree. Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. I think they're going to pull it out.
Okay. We got the Steelers. I agree with you. I'm taking the Chargers. We got the Steelers at the Ravens for the 7 o'clock game on Saturday. I'll take this one. I'm going to take the Ravens, man. The Steelers defense is legit, but their offense has struggled. The Ravens, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, they're all looking spicy. So I'm going to take the Ravens here.
Yeah, I predict that this game's going to be closer than most people think. I don't know what the line is yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be a one-score game. In part because the Steelers tend to do that, and also in part because we haven't really seen Lamar Jackson show up in go time. We haven't really seen him decide, hey, it's playoff time, I'm going to put on an MVP performance. He kind of falls off in the postseason. I do think the Ravens are going to win, but I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think.
Would it be devastating if the Steelers won and knocked the Ravens out?
No, that would be awesome. I'm rooting for that
awesome.
as a Chiefs fan.
Yeah, that would be cool. Sunday, Broncos at the Bills for the noon game. It's the Bills, baby. The Bills are, I think they're going to manhandle them. Sorry, you were supposed to go first. I apologize. I'm taking the Bills. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also taking the Bills. Broncos are a good team. I just don't think they're quite ready yet for this stage. And I think the Bills, Josh Allen is the man. He should be the MVP. I think he will win the MVP. And it would not surprise me if we, as Chiefs fans, are playing the Bills in the AFC Championship.
I would agree with that. Packers at Eagles, 3:30. Scotty, I'm sorry. I'm going to let you go.
This one's tough. This one is probably the closest matchup. I don't know. The next one's pretty close too. But I think I'm going to go with the Eagles. The Packers, very, very good team. The Eagles just seem like they're steamrolling right now. It seems like the Eagles are like they're kind of the unspoken franchise for this Super Bowl, like, because everybody's talking about the Vikings and the Lions in the NFC, and in the AFC we're talking about the Bills and the Chiefs, and the Eagles are just out there getting shit done and putting themselves in position to win. And they are a very, very, very good team. I think the Packers are still just a little bit young, a little bit unpredictable, and the Eagles, especially with Saquon Barkley, just seem very, very good at football. And plus, maybe Saquon might be a little bit mad. He might be a little salty about not being able to go get that record. So maybe he'll come out and put up 200 yards.
Nick Sirianni, you're a scumbag. Commanders at Bucks for the 7 o'clock game. Who are you taking? Sorry, you were taking a sip of water there. I could have went. I can still go if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to take the Commanders. I think this is going to be a very close game, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks won, but the Commanders are so frisky, dude. And the Bucks have shown some inconsistency, and so have the Commanders. But I do think the Commanders have a legitimate chance to win this game and go to the next round. So I'm going to take the Commanders here.
Yeah, this is a coin flip, not because both teams are awesome, but because both teams are unpredictable. Like, we just don't know what product we're going to get from either side. I think I'll agree with you, though. I love Baker Mayfield. I love his story. I love Mike Evans. But I think the story of Jaden Daniels in his rookie season, making it to the playoffs, winning a playoff game is just exciting. And I love Jaden Daniels. I love his personality. I want to see him succeed. So I think just kind of out of will, I'm hoping that the Commanders win.
Okay. Last game, Monday night game. This is going to be fun. Vikings at the Rams for the 7 o'clock Monday night game.
Yeah, this is another one I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I'm going to go with the Vikings. I think the Vikings have a chip on their shoulder. I think they're a more complete team than the Rams. The Rams have been, even though they've won a lot of games in the second part of the season, they're just like, when you think of the Rams, you think of Matthew Stafford throwing for a bunch of yards and, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua going off, and that's just not really how the offense has looked in recent games. So I think there's a chance that the Rams, flip the switch and turn it on. We know what they can do, but as of right now, save the Vikings playing against the Lions, I think the Vikings are the second best team in the NFC, and they should be favored against everybody.
I'm going to take the Rams. I agree. I think I wouldn't be surprised either way, but gosh, man, the Rams are just, we said it going into the playoffs. The Rams are the team nobody wants to play right now. I would be afraid to play the Rams, and I would be scared that they're going to beat, if I was a Viking, I would be afraid of them. I would be afraid to play them because they are a well-coached team. They are very, very, they're strong. They're just a well-coached, strong team. I have a lot of faith in Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell as well. And I think that, by the way, I think if the Vikings lose this game, I think this kind of squashes a lot of the conversation about what do you do with Sam Darnold in the future.
Yep.
So I think that helps the argument for moving on from him. And I do think, I think the Lions kind of showcased how to beat the Vikings, or at least kind of gave some blueprints to the Rams to be able to utilize and say, okay, like, what do we need to do to yield the same results? So I'm going to take the Rams here. I think we agreed on all of these games except for this one. And I really do think that the Rams are going to dominate. I have one more question before we get out of here, Scotty. And I meant to ask this earlier. Between these two teams, which do you think is the better team currently? Or the team that, and obviously it all depends on who they're playing, but do you think the Broncos are more frisky right now or the Rams are more frisky? Like, which team would you rather not see in the playoffs?
I think I would rather play the Broncos than the Rams.
I would agree with that.
I think the reason for that is just because the Rams are similar to the Bengals in just that you could see their offense putting up 50 points. Like, you could see them just running away with a game. And I don't think you can see that from the Broncos right now. I mean, they're a very competent team. They have a very good defense. And largely their success is coming from their defense keeping games close. So their rookie quarterback can afford to make a few mistakes and still win games. The Rams haven't been performing, like I said, as to a high caliber as we would hope, but we know that they're capable of it. We know Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua can combine for 250 yards and 4 touchdowns, like on any given week. And we know Matthew Stafford is a competent quarterback. So I'm afraid of the potential of that offense. Now, whether we see that play out or not remains to be seen, but certainly the potential is there, more so than with the Broncos.
Okay. That's it. That's all the time we have here today. So everybody who has made it to the end of the show, genuinely do appreciate your continued support. We're going to keep doing this, so we're not going anywhere. But we appreciate you all tuning in. Go check out the Fantasy Brains. I know fantasy football season is over, but that does not mean fantasy football is done, because it's always going on. Fantasy football is it is an ongoing and everlasting thing.
It's dynasty season, baby.
It is dynasty season. So go check out the Fantasy Brains. They are on Thursday nights, so hit the subscribe button wherever you might be listening so you can tune into them as well. And then check out LeatherBrainz.com. We got some great writers over there. They're doing a wonderful job. I could not state that enough, and I appreciate all the articles that they're writing because it's good stuff. So that's it, Scotty. Appreciate you doing this with me today, and let's get out of here, brother. We
are
out.
This is our Colts. This is our team. We bleed blue. This is our Colts. Whether win or lose, we love them. For the shoe, Colts Forge. Let the world hear us now. This is our team. Go Colts.